guiding our advisors and tell us if the work that we're doing is correct. They're helping us open doors, partnerships. And we have, for example, the UN Youth Envoy is there. We have somebody from the World Bank. We have Princess Beatriz, who's very engaged. So this one has been really interesting, the efforts that we've been doing with them. And we also have set up 6 regional youth groups. We went through a very interesting nomination process where we have around 30 young people who are our youth envoys, and we have invited them to many events, many activities in ITU, and I will share it in the next slide a bit. But also towards that, we have made an effort for all ITU to understand what is meaningful youth engagements and trainings. We set up an ITU youth task force across the whole ITU so that every part of the work that we're doing is somewhat permeated with that. And we've come with different interesting initiatives. We have a virtual community, which is Facebook, and last week we launched our Instagram account. We're very happy about that. And then only in this first year, we've done more than 90 events and initiatives. So we've been very busy, and we've done quite a few meetings with our board members. We have them also helping us with partnerships. And we have more than 50 young people engaging in different meetings and events throughout the year at the regional and the global level. So it was a great birthday to celebrate. Can you continue, Dinara?
Yes. So,
let me finish up this. I will give you where the summit. No, continue the next slide. So, yes. And then here, just some of the special initiatives. And we have also launched last week our first ever podcast, By Youth for Youth. And it's precisely young people talking about these challenges that they had on the limitations because of COVID with the problems of not being connected and being able to access their education. And we had very good interventions from their personal experience. So if you have a chance to listen to that podcast, we launched a very cool initiative where we want to develop an icon for e-waste, which is also part of ITU's important work, but we want it to be designed by young people because we want them to adopt this and become the ones, our ambassadors in adopting these efforts. So as you can see, there's many activities, but we're open also to do a lot more. And I think now we can go to the next slide with Junola, who's our youth officer. She's a young person, so we're trying to walk the talk. We have a lot of young person, a lot of interns and people in the team. So Dinara will share a bit of what our plans are for next year with the summit. Go ahead, Dinara.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. As Sylvia said, this year has been super exciting, and we have so many initiatives, not just sort of on a global level, but also on a regional level. And then, we also have our virtual community where any young person across the world can make their voices heard in the digital development dialogue. So next year, we have the Generation Connected Youth Summit, and it will precede WTDC, which is the World Telecommunications Development Conference. It's a conference that happens once every 4 years. It's an ITU conference, and this time, Generation Connect Youth Summit will be held just in the days leading up to WTDC. So we're hoping it's going to be in a hybrid format so that young people can participate virtually all across the world and also be in person at the summit physically. And for the virtual participants, we're looking at ages 15 to 29, and then physical participants, we're looking at 18 to 29. So something really exciting that we're doing in the Youth Summit is that we're co-creating everything with young people. So from everything, from the content, the structure, the look and feel, the special thing, like everything happening in the summit is being co-designed with youth. And we have a co-design team, and it's comprised of some of our youth envoys, our regional youth envoys, and we're making sure that every region is represented. Young people from each region are participating. Some of the Generation Connect Visionaries board members that Sylvia was speaking about earlier, also our focal points from each of our regional offices are also involved in the co-design team. And also the youth task force members And recently we did the Generation Connect Video Pitch Challenge. So some of the winners of that challenge are also part of the co-design. We've had workshops so far where we, doing brainstorming and really trying to find new ideas and fresh things that we can bring to the summit so that we can make sure that this is really a meaningful conference where young people have a say in how it's planned, how it's executed, and actually will enjoy the summit and also have real impact, because the work that we do at the Youth Summit will feed into WTDC, which is, the work that, many decision makers from across the world, where they will be at the time. And we're hoping for things like intergenerational dialogues, workshops, all sorts of things, capacity building sessions, interactive sessions. We really want it to be an offering, for young people across the world where they feel like this is something that's impactful for them. And that's why they're part of the co-design. And, we're now welcoming partnerships and support because our goal is to have at least 400 young people, at least, one male, female from each member state physically at the summit. And that's the least. We hope it will be even more than this. We're also thinking about the unconnected young people and how we can provide opportunities for them to engage. And we're thinking of regional hubs where universities and other organizations can potentially be hubs where young people who may not have access to the internet can connect virtually to the summit and also make their voices heard as well. And of course, there are special things that we would like to have. We want virtual reality, we want, all sorts of things, holograms and screens and workshops and side events and all these things that the young people have said that they themselves want to make sure we're able to deliver this, because it's an ITU conference after all, want to be at the forefront of technology, but also have the opportunities for young people's voices and ideas to be heard. So that's what we have so far on the Youth Summit, and we definitely would be happy to hear any questions. We have a video, but I don't know if we have enough time to see it. So it's only a minute and 50 seconds, so we can share the link afterwards. Or Sylvia, should we play it? Or did we have enough time?
I think we are squeezed for time, so we'll have to by all means share the link though. And thank you both very much for that wonderful summary and all the progress that you've made so far. We need to turn now to Robert Opp and digital capacity building. And Robert, I hope you'll give some thought to this whole question of what parameters of our giant partial differential equation should we be capturing as we think about capacity building. So Robert, the floor is yours.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks, Vint. And it's a hard act to follow to have the energy of the Generation Connect, and then go back to our sort of a little bit more staid and traditional approach to digital capacity building. But we'll do our best. I will share my screen, and I just wanted to give, as usual, a update on the work that we've done as part of the Secretary General's Digital Cooperation Roadmap on the area of digital capacity building, which is co-led by ITU and UNDP. So I won't go over the whole ground of the roundtable process that we've run with a bunch of partners related to this. We're just going to focus this time on the multi-stakeholder network, which was one of the actions that came out of that roundtable process. So one of the main findings of the roundtable was that there was a lot going on in the area of digital capacity building, but it was very fragmented and not very discoverable. So in an effort to try to add to the field, which is already got a number of organizations and institutions working there, we created a multi-stakeholder network that is really meant to kind of bring together those who would like to find out more about what capacity building resources are available, and also be a sort of a matchmaker with the supply and the demand side of the equation. So it's really about everything from local, regional, global players, different thematic areas. We want to be a value added. We're not trying to sort of take any territory away from anyone else, but try to give an additional layer of discoverability, because this is really one of the challenges. We have some other actions that are more focused on adding to the field of capacity building. There's a joint facility that's been created between ITU and UNDP that's looking at some things on that, but I'm not going to speak too much about that today. Just a couple of updates on where we are with the multi-stakeholder network. We're actually going to be officially launching this at the Internet Governance Forum coming up. We're going to have an event with a panel that will be supported also by the SG's Tech Envoy office. And so we'll be doing that event. So it will be a hybrid event. It will be open to anybody who'd like to join. So we'll make sure that that's available for those who are interested. It will just be kind of, we've got the network that's sort of up and running in a kind of beta sense right now, but that will officially launch the overall network. We'll then start to actually implement or kind of full swing in January 2022. Just a quick update on the website that's available. It's digital-capacity.org. We have on there a database that was created with a mapping that we did originally as part of the roundtable process. We have, I think it's between 150 and 200, I might actually be underestimating that, number of entries of different areas of digital capacity building that are available from different partners. And we wanted to try to, in that effort to make things discoverable, to lift that into a database. We've got some good feedback now from initial users on that, and we're going to be adding things and features like advanced search functionalities, a kind of a navigation wizard, the ability to add and upload trainings for people themselves, and just improving the overall design. One very last thing to mention, and this is something that UNDP is working on with Harvard University. We're going to be organizing a learning session on building local capacity specifically to implement digital public goods. We're looking at around the 8th of December for that. And again, we'd like to welcome partners to join that, and we'll have to give a little bit more information when we've got the details available. Vint, that was basically all I wanted to share. I know it's a bit of a quick update today, but I'm happy to answer any questions or respond to any comments.
Well, first of all, a quick update was very helpful because we're almost back on schedule thanks to you. So that's helpful. But if there are questions, by all means, let's capture some. So does anyone have questions for yes, Dorothy?
Hi. I think that all of us who work in this field see the lack of coordination. That's a reality. And then the lack of clear benchmarking that will allow people to understand when progress is being made. One of the arguments has been to try and get a global system of qualifications that will show us different paths to actually preparing people for the kind of gaps we see in the job market. We know we don't have the skills. How do we get the people to get those skills fast enough? And particularly in developing countries or emerging economies, whichever one you want to choose, the fact is that they're being exploited because they don't have the capacity to actually manage for example, e-government packages that are becoming the norm. And you see them giving away data, you see them paying too much for solutions, and then this, of course, is actually having a negative impact on development. So for UNDP, lots of challenge.
So Robert, I don't know whether you have an immediate reaction to that, but there are several questions in the chat too about the possibility of linking the catalog of digital, linking your catalog to a catalog of digital solutions from Kate Wilson.
Yes.
So please have a look at the chat.
Sure, and yeah, I've already just pinged a quick answer to Kate. Happy to link those efforts. Dorothy's question is something that is actually on our minds a lot, not just in this area of work, but also in the broader work that UNDP and partners like ITU and others do when we support partners like governments or cities or community groups on issues related to, kind of bridging the digital divide is fine, right? Infrastructure, affordability, but then when you get to the usability piece, it is, what is the kind of standard kind of internet onboarding, and this is a bit to your initial point, Vin, what is the standard onboarding that should be provided to people who are joining the internet for the first time, a kind of like a type of a user's manual, if you will. And right now that is very, very fragmented. In fact, most places doesn't exist. And so one of the things that we're trying to kind of sort through is, of course, governments of each national domain will have the final say on the kinds of things that are made available.
He's mute. You don't hear you.
You're muted, Robert, for some reason. It looks like you must have hit something. Boy, technology is doing us in today, isn't it?
Vint, I'm sorry. Where did I? Can you hear me now?
You must have muted yourself somehow. At least something muted you. But we're also kind of out of time.
Okay, I apologize. Did you hear anything of what I said? Because it was very eloquent and beautiful.
Yeah. Well, we got about a minute of it, and then you went.
You're so modest.
Okay. Well, the best part started after a minute. No, sorry. So just really quickly, this is something on our minds, and the question is really, as international organizations, and ideally in partnership with other players like telcos and tech companies, how could we create that sort of common standard, Dorothy, that you're mentioning? So it's on our minds and something that we're looking at. And sorry about that. I actually accidentally unplugged my headset. So a very analog issue.
Oh, well.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks so much, Robert. We appreciate it. I'm sorry we can't get to other questions, but we're trying very hard to make sure everybody has a chance to offer their presentation. So next up is Tamara Singh, and this is to hear what happened at COP26, and are we all still in danger?
Thank you. And I don't know whether my screen is visible. I tried to share it. This is not my most humble screen.
Yes, it's on the screen. We can see it.
Fantastic. And I know Nicole is here. Nicole, you spoke on more panels than I did. And so I don't know whether you'll echo some of the sentiments. But at COP26, my sense was really very much one of an audience and a participation of a group of quite frustrated people. And so my panel was really focused on capital and finance innovation, where that frustration has been brewing for some time. I'm going to try and do what Robert did and go relatively quickly through the takeaways, and then bring it back, hopefully, to where Robert was at around skills and where Dorothy was coming out with the discussion around how we can bring things to the people. So on my panel, very quickly though, we spoke about how at 1 minute to midnight, really the time is sort of past for us to start talking about how we're going to innovate. It's time for finance to go big and go home. And the way we talked about doing that was really around re-examining what we call the fiduciary concept, where historically we've always had negative obligation to not do bad things. We thought this was the time now to kind of think about becoming much more positive and active and doing the right things without being needed to be told to do it, so not needing a mandate from the asset owners. We talked about redefining our portfolio themes, so we moved away from the idea of siloed verticals, the idea of investing in infrastructure, in tech stocks, or in renewable energy in isolation, and thinking about a more holistic way of investing. So place-based investing, the idea that you kind of don't just invest in the roads, but you also think about the production facilities, the education and caregiving facilities that would come around building up an entire community. And linked to all that, we talked about how we would need to align return expectations with time horizons. So historically, we're very used to this world of instant gratification, and in finance, that really plays around annual dividends, profit numbers, annual statements. But how can we now think about the idea that we invest today for something that will pay dividends in 15, 20 years? And how do we make sure we reward those behaviors today so that we can keep the incentives flowing? So some of the ideas that came up at the table were things like the citizens' dividend, the idea of tokenized future value, and the mathematics of it. How do we make sure there's no double counting and attribution and claiming of those rewards? The people you see on the screen actually ended up sort of channeling their frustration, sort of saying, we've talked about this long enough, even as we were talking about it in the panel. And so what's happening right now is, in the capacity I have as PCI, I'm working with the Green Finance Institute, the other big face on the screen, to come up with a concept note around how we can start thinking about developing this future value sort of asset to bring the future rewards into today's investments. I wanted to go back to the last time I spoke to this audience when we talked about how digital public goods could form, how we could use data to create a public good that could be invested into to deliver outsized benefits. And going to what Dorothy was saying, this what I spoke about last time was really this idea about bringing MSMEs into the conversation, including them, getting them to participate, but then also working on the literacy aspect, not just digital literacy where they learn to participate via having a data footprint, owning their data, being able to leverage their data for their own purposes, but also their sustainability literacy, understanding how they can transition their behaviors. In that conversation I had last time, we also spoke about how we would help use that data footprint to then gain access to finance. And going back to what Robert was saying, this really involved working with the telcos and e-commerce firms. And last time I also shared the transition story, how we could create a carbon use case. And just to quickly wrap up today, I thought I'd try and string these concepts together, how finance and the work of the PCI and the data piece all comes together. And so if you'll indulge me, I'm about to try something I've never tried live before, so hopefully it'll work. So here in the MSME spaces, and I'm hoping this drawing is coming up, the challenge that would exist in taking MSMEs on this journey and getting them to the ability to take advantage of things like carbon credits is that they're just too small. They don't have the size of impact that would be needed to make them investable in isolation. And so this is where we started working with the Digital Divide Institute and the Ministry of SMEs and Cooperatives in Indonesia, for example, to think about pooling their efforts and working with co-ops and communities. From that perspective, we then thought, okay, who can support that? And so that's where we came into the example of the data providers. And we thought about using people like SustainCert, who are a carbon certification provider linked to the gold standard, who can therefore work to create credible carbon accreditation programs. We then thought, okay, that's awesome. We now have the ability to have certificates in our data utility. We have inputs from the MSMEs themselves that have been trusted and verified. But how do we actually distribute that? How do we get people to turn that into resources that pay it back into the communities and the MSMEs? And that's where people like some of the partners we've been talking to for the data utility come into play. So going to the data users perspective, you then have people like HSBC who can provide loans and financing. We have people like DBS and Standard Chartered Bank who also are providing those. But more than that, they can do slightly different things. DBS and Standard Chartered, who I've lumped together there, are involved with a climate impact exchange project here in the Asia Pacific, where they can offer for sale carbon certificates that are accredited and high quality. They're also, of course, doing loans, where those carbon certificates can be used as collateral. And they can also be used to offset interest repayments. The question becomes then, what do you do with all those loans? And that's where HSBC becomes very interesting. HSBC has recently done a pilot project with an organization in Singapore called MarketNode, where they worked to digitally issue green bonds. Those green bonds could then be packaged and unsold, creating that lovely flow of funds, creating leverage, and helping resources get to the right place. I'm conscious of the time. This pack will go out. Apologies, I'm a little bit late with it. But what we'll see here is how those ideas of how these things string together show a way of actually coming real. So in the left-hand side is a press release that came out a few days ago where the Project Greenprint in Singapore, which I'm pretty sure might get referenced by the next speaker who's also crossing into Tuesday with me, where they've been working with Olam International. So Olam International is an actual use case we cited last time. Olam works with farm gates to actually capture and create digital footprints. And they are specifically looking at smart carbon solutions right now. Climate Impact X is referenced in the middle article, and on the back, on the far side will be some thought leadership pieces around really how the COP panel went and the 3 themes of fiduciary and the like, and also the idea of MSME financing. And that, I hope, it's me done in 7 minutes.
That was absolutely fantastic, Tamara. And the thing which is so encouraging about this is it feels very creative. It feels like, we're looking at this from very different dimensions. Of course, my first reaction about carbon sequestration is, look, this is easy. What we should do is we sequester all the carbon and then compress it into diamonds, and that will fund everything.
It probably would, but I'm hoping that we can NFT maybe some of those carbon certificates, and then they'll get picked up on sentiment alone.
There we go. Perfect. Well, we actually have 1 minute left in case anyone wants to specifically. There are a bunch of questions and comments that have shown up in the chat, so I draw your attention to that tomorrow. There's a lot of interest in this. Jane says it's super interesting for many of us, many of our infrastructure partners. And Eric Rasmussen says, might be time to rethink Hank Patton's work on intergenerational finance, which is an interesting twist on this whole question. We know that there's a gigantic transfer of wealth happening right now. And so that might factor into some of this. It might even be attractive for some people to invest in the instruments that you're describing.
Thanks. I'll get back to everyone in the next few minutes, but Chilling is lined up for next. And I can't wait to hear her.
All right. Thank you so much, Tamara. Well, next up is Eric Rasmussen with a wonderful human geography update, which I guess, well, Eric, you're going to tell us what that means.
I will. And I am happily coming out of order, so I was getting a cup of coffee. I'm ready to go. It's nice to see all of you this morning. Thanks for the invitation. I'm going to try to bring up my, hang on just 1 second. I'm going to see where this is now. I'm sharing this. Can't share my screen.
Oh, no.
So let somebody else share my screen. Marlene, I think I sent you a presentation. Would you be kind enough to share it full screen?
Is it
Nice
literally, are you just getting an error message saying you can't share your screen?
Yeah, it says that I do not have permission to share my screen. I'm fine with that. But I'm going to tell you some interesting stuff, and I'm also going to tell you pretty quickly because I recognize that time is of the essence. There we go. If you please put that in full screen, that'd be great.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and put that all the way at the beginning, since that's at the end.
Yeah. Sorry, I kept saying 50%. Go ahead.
Let's go to the beginning. That's the last slide.
Well, that was a way of getting you to. That was a clever way of getting you to finish early. That's all.
There we go. That's right. The bottom line is right there. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this human geography working group. And next slide, please. The data I'm going to show you is as of about the end of last month. And this is the working group that was originally put together about a decade ago by state and NGA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, because there was a recognition that we were not able to share data openly the way we needed to, sometimes in very urgent situations like disaster response. So no surprise to any of that. We got this underway. We determined that it was going to be free, open source, open data. It was going to be cross-sectoral. It was going to be complex systems recognition, nonpartisan, and source agnostic. Next, please. We began working on this idea that we needed to look at the hierarchy of data that was required for human society. And we were drinking a little bit at the time, so this came out interestingly looking like Olympic rings. Thank you, Ben. And you can see that if you look at a little like Maslow's hierarchy, you see that water, energy, and food at the bottom. Communication is more foundational than it used to be, and is at least equivalent to shelter in many circumstances. And all the way at the top was governance, because we found that a lot of us who are running disaster response team, and you know that many other people may not, but I run the disaster response team for the Roddenberry Foundation, among others, the Star Trek franchise. And we've deployed quite a bit, and we found that we have problems that appear rapidly in those areas where circumstances are such that a government, a national government, a local government is no longer in charge. A lot of militias show up. We just saw that in Haiti with the earthquake in Lakai about 2 months ago. Next, please. The group that we have founded over the last 10 years, and I've been moderating it for the entire time, is now about 5,000 members coming from about 140 countries. It has a lot of organizations within it. It is all about the open sharing of free data that can be removed and taken to wherever you need it, and you do whatever you wish. Next, please. The demographics have become quite broad. So we have some private sector, we have some militaries, we have a lot of NGOs, we have a lot of civil agencies that are inside their respective countries. Next, please, because I'll just go quick. We've had about 53 webinars that we've held over the last 10 years. We've also held, as you see in the middle, a bunch of live events. We have held them at US Geological Survey. We've held them at the World Bank. We've held them at Southcon in Miami. We held them at the University of Colorado, University of California in San Diego. We've also had a lot of data calls. When something urgent happens, we send out to all 5,000 members, what information do you have on, for example, Fiji, which had just been hit by a storm, or Mexico, because Cyclone Pam had just come through. And people flood in with open data that they have collected for one reason or another, and we make all of that data freely available, and if necessary, we translate it to some other language or some other form that's required for that sharing. Next, please. This is an example of one of the events that we held at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. This is and I chose this poster deliberately because you wouldn't think that NGA, a part of the intelligence community, would be interested in open data, and they are. And they're also interested in sharing data that they hold, particularly from satellites. And we've done a lot to write the legislation and write the international agreements that allow that sharing on a very rapid basis. This on wildlife trafficking turned out to be very popular, and we had a lot of people at this symposium, and NGA was quite hospitable about it, to our collective surprise. Next, please. We developed something called the Human Security Taxonomy, and you'll see my name all over this, but I was only one member of the team, and this is a collection of information that we think is important to know about for a particular place that you need to know about. What kind of things do you need to see? And we tied it into a lot of the international standards, like the Complex Humanitarian Emergency Standards out of the United Nations, the National Academy of Sciences, Human Geography template, and so forth. This is all freely available. Next, please. The HST has a bunch of base map layers to make sure that you understand the place that you're looking at. Next, please. And it has a lot of foundation layers that come on top of that. Two in particular you see highlighted: tourism, infrastructure, and veterinary issues, is because we have learned that in a disaster, the most fragile populations are those in the service industries, and it doesn't take long for them to get broken so badly. They lose the fact that they've got 3 or 4 people into an apartment, the apartment goes away because tourists have gone away, and they go back into the slums, and it takes a generation to come back out. We have good studies on that. And so we pay particular attention to restarting tourism infrastructure after a disaster, not to help the state, but to help the most vulnerable population that used to be employed in the industry. The veterinary issues is because I led a team what is the name of that hurricane that happened in New Orleans? Katrina, thank you. And we had people stuck on rooftops, and they wouldn't leave their rooftops without their cat or their dog. And sometimes their horse. So we now make arrangements in relief operations to ensure we can care for pets. Next, please. Speaking of pets, I have a cat coming into the viewpoint here. We have a human geography library where we have collected all of this stuff, and we make sure it's available to everybody. It runs across the entire spectrum for the things that we worry about. It is currently added to about 50 times a month. And we have a very nice interface now to make sure that the data is accessible to anybody who needs it. Next, please. Here's what it looked like. It was originally a spreadsheet. It's now much better than that, as all things exponential have improved over the years. Next, please. And we have a weekly newsletter that I curate. This is an example of one that came out. In fact, it's 3 that have come out in the past 3 weeks, just to see the kind of things that we care about. It is all human geography. It is mostly around human security, and a lot of it recently has become about climate change, because frankly, that is the human security issue we need to care about. That is the human geography issue that we need to care about. Next, please. All of this is free, all of it. I work in the Marshall Islands, and some of the work that we have done with WWHED has been out on the CHESS survey, where we used some friends at Google. Finn, thank you very much. You actually made that initial introduction to get Google Earth to get us a new image of a slum in the Marshall Islands. And out of that, we began to walk around and get the kind of surveys onto the map that the Marshallese have never seen for themselves. Next, please. We did this with a bunch of kids who were coming in from around the Marshall Islands, and we taught them a bunch of things that were useful. We had a little oceanography from Princeton, a little accounting from National University of Singapore. The Japanese Space Agency was involved, and we spent a summer teaching them how they can look at their own islands and the existential threats that they face. We started with a survey that broke one of the islands, one that has a particular slum on it, called Ibai, into these 5 parts, and we did a survey using the kids. And the kids collected for their local administration, for their schools, information about what was known about the houses, because no survey of any kind had ever been done. Next, please. We asked questions like this. There are 13 in there. That's me teaching the kids. And we wound up getting quite a bit of information, a decent sample of a very dense slum that has a population density roughly twice that of Manhattan. Next, please.
Wow.
And there's a bunch of people that are leading this team that is the WWHGD. Some are compensated, many are not. It is all volunteer, and it is also as integrated as we can possibly get it for people coming in from all of those countries sharing their data. Next, please. Everything that we have is freely available. All recordings for all the webinars, the live events, Human Geography Library, and the weekly highlights that are coming out at www.hge.org. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you for an incredibly terse fire hose. That was just wonderful results that you're getting. How do you? I have 2 questions, Eric. One of them is, how do you avoid information pollution? How are you assured that the data is reasonably accurate that you're getting? And second, how on earth were you able to collect the data that you did, since in other parts of the world, like here in the U.S., it practically requires an act of Congress before you're allowed to ask questions that are very PPI related?
Right. If you're talking about the stuff in the Marshall Islands, I'll get into the second
yes, for example.
Yes. That was all done by the Marshallese. We have nothing to do with it directly except guidance. They wanted to know what they ought to ask of their population in order to begin to develop the services that they thought were required. That is described in Wikipedia as the worst slum in the Pacific. It's not. I have been to worse slums. I have worked in worse slums. But the people who are there, CalGov, the Kwajalein Atoll government, is the administrative services that are supposed to be responsible for that population, and they knew nothing about them. So they brought us in because we were an objective, multinational, free and open data group. And they said, are you willing to help us do the surveys? Absolutely. So we worked with the kids. The kids were answering only to the local administrative offices, and we took nothing from that one.
And the data quality question, how do you deal with that?
Data quality is not bad. So we have a number of human geographers. That last little slide that I showed with the team of people, those are professional GIS folks by and large. And they also have a bunch of people that come in to curate the Human Geography Library. We bring out a new version of it every month, having verified that all the links are real, that it's coming from a credible source, that it is relatively complete, that it doesn't seem to be planted, that there is an historical record that says it's been there before, and so forth. So while it's undoubtedly imperfect, it's not bad.
Thank you.
Sure.
Sorry, Kristen Little mentions to you in the chat that she wants to connect you with a group at MIT that's doing similar work.
Absolutely.
I think
yes. And in fact, we do quite a bit of work with MIT, and we have presented. We had a live conference at MIT a couple of years ago. Yes, I would love to, Kristen. Thank you very much.
Great. I'll make that happen.
Thank you. And I will stop. Anything else I can do for anybody else?
Thank you. That's fabulous. We really appreciate it, Eric. Not only the presentation, but what you're doing, which is pragmatic and successful.
Right. Take care, guys. I'll be right here. And
you put us nearly back on schedule. So unless there's an objection, I'm going to move on to the India stack from Arvind Gupta at Ispirit. So Arvind, you're on. If you're here.
Yes, I can, and I'm just trying to start my presentation. Meanwhile, I hope I don't have tech issues. So I'm Arvind Gupta. I'm based in New Delhi, and thank you, Vint and Malin, for having me part of this. So Okay, present now. Present your entire screen. Let me try that. Maybe that will work.
It's presenting.
Something is happening.
Yeah, what we're
It's gonna-
seeing the usual echo effect. So presumably you want to present a particular tab on your browser, maybe, or a window.
Can I? I'm just going to mail this to Mail-In, and can I request you to make the presentation, because I think this is not going to work on a Safari and a Google combination. So let me just talk. I think I have 15 minutes, so I'm going to judiciously use my time.
Yes.
We have. I have two things to discuss today. What has been India's approach to building digital public goods, and how it has helped in both digital inclusion as well as financial inclusion, and where are we going from here? Just from a context perspective, we have, India has probably contributed over 400 new bank account holders to the Indian economy in the last few years, and that's been due to a massive effort of what we call India Stack. And that India Stack is what has been the building block in India's digital growth model. So I'm for the benefit of everybody in this audience, I'm going to just talk about India Stack and then how it has developed into a financial inclusion, a digital inclusion platform. India, from a 155th rank in the digital inclusion list, is probably now in the top 5, with the cost of data being the lowest and the amount of data being used by consumers as one of the highest. So, as things would be.
I haven't got the slides yet. I've been looking.
I'm still trying to attach that slide and send it to you, Melin. It's whatever. It didn't have to. This is so funny when things don't want to work; they just don't work. Yeah, I wish I can do this, but I'm just going to keep talking. So, what we have done is really created a common public goods platform, which is now being used for telecom, for financial inclusion, for credit, something that Malin wanted me to talk about, and I am send PDF. So what I wanted to talk about is, in the last 10 years, what India has done, built this stack. We are a nation of 1.4 billion people, 22 official languages, 86% of Indians don't speak English, and of course, our financial diversity and and literacy is very, very different across India. So when we talk about building a platform, it's not just building a platform, it's building sometimes 25 platforms combined into one, so that it can serve in different languages and different different literacy levels. So for those of you who don't know, we started with what is called Identity Stack. India built an identity platform called Aadhaar, gave every single Indian a digitally verifiable identity, which is biometrically verified, and that is the base of our India Stack. And on top of it, we build a eKYC and eSign platform, which today the first platform, identity, makes me really paperless. The second platform really makes me, I can do anything presence-less. I can e-sign a document, I can do KYC checks, I can open a bank account in less than 2 minutes, I can open a telecom account in 2 minutes, but also at a cost which is 1/40th the original cost. Earlier, it would take about $30 to $40 to do a KYC check for a telecom, a new consumer. But now today we've been able to bring down that cost to about $1, and that's a lot of money still in India. But what that has done is that has enabled telecom companies, new telecom companies and old telecom companies, to offer very, very competitive data plans. India has the cheapest data rates in the world today. It's less than 10 cents a GB, even lesser than that with the dollar going up. So that's the second thing. The eKYC platform has done that. The third layer is a layer of what is called the payments layer. And for all of us who would understand technology, it is SMTP for payments, basically. We have created a payment address for every single bank account holder in any type of instrument. So my name or my mobile number is my payment address. So sending money from X to Y is like sending a data packet, and that has really transformed India in terms of P2P payments, merchant to consumer payments, small payments, and the amount of data exhaust we have produced is amazing. Just to give context, we are now doing close to 5 billion transactions a month.
Wow.
On this platform called the UPI, India's Unified Payments Interface. Goes back to your days of really standardizing payments and building the SMTP layer for email. So it's like very easy to explain. Is SMTP for payments. All this combined, and on top of it, we are building the data consent layer, which is now how you share data. Part of that consent layer, one section of that is the account aggregator. The account aggregator is for financial data. How do you share it, for what purpose you share it, and who gets it for what time, and the user gives consent to a particular a data consumer who then can only use it for a specified time and specified purpose and cannot share it further. So that is the overall architecture of this the India stack and the account aggregator. But the biggest thing that we have really built in India is now a thinking that every stack, every technology going forward from here will be a public goods. It's a non-profit trust. A non-profit trust is created for each stack. A company is created, a CTO is appointed, and we work on creating that stack for that particular technology. And the going forward stacks are language stacks, voice stacks, e-commerce stack, where we can transact anything from anybody to anybody. So we are not bound by a particular technology. And all of them are called networks or interfaces rather than platforms, because its approach is open and open that every consumer can participate, everybody can participate. So yes, and actually Tamara says that it's about collaboration in finance. One of the things in financial inclusion always has been not only just opening bank account, but enabling credit to the last person. And for credit, if you need good data, that was non-existent, and UPI brought about. The payments layer really created that data exhaust as I'm talking about. And today we are able to do a lot of algorithmic credit and flow-based credit, depending on how banks and everybody cooperates with each other and shares data. So I think that's the summary. I will send a PDF file soon as this is over, and I'm open to any questions that you may have. India's journey has been that I always say this, that we are the only, India Stack is the only technology tool used by more than 1 billion people that is not owned by a private company.
First of all, thank you for being able to present that in a very coherent way in the absence of slides. That tells you something about your articulate ability to explain things, so thank you for that. Second, I am very curious about the UPI in particular, and how you manage to protect the transactions, and in particular, how do you avoid someone essentially stealing money by introducing a transaction, taking money out of someone else's account. So there must be some cryptographic mechanisms and digital signatures perhaps that are involved. And if there are, then there's some background associated with either, who issued the certificates, how do you know that the certificates are valid? Can you say just a little, or at least point me in the right direction, or maybe after this call we can talk about it more deeply?
So, first of all, India is so diverse. If we made a digital signature for each transaction, first of all, the transaction cost will go up. And these are, I'm talking about, 2 cents, 5 cents transactions. So if I go to a shop today, and I want to pay half $1, I just don't think. I take out my phone and just do it. Now, from a security perspective, there is a two-factor authentication, and that is what we use.
Okay.
Coming to fraud does happen. Fraud does happen, especially because we have mandates. You can do a reverse payment link, which basically means I can seek money from you. So if I'm paying my mortgage payments, I can create 12 mandates, and those mandates will come automatically to you, and you click on the link and you pay your
These
monthly due
are
debt.
authorized transactions drawing on your account. Yes, a lot of us use
Absolutely.
those.
So in that mandate business, people have misused that mandate, especially in the era of digital and financial illiteracy. That people thought they are making a payment, vis-a-vis they were actually authorizing a withdrawal from that account. That has happened, and I think that's a work in progress to solve that constant problem from a policy perspective as well as from a technology implementation perspective. But the biggest implementation, as somebody else was saying before me, is financial literacy and digital literacy. That pact to understand what you're doing, and the COVID pandemic, India has added about 200 million internet users in the last 18 months.
Wow.
So, when that happens, I think we always have an issue of, what comes first, whether digital connectivity comes first or literacy comes first. We are trying to do as much as literacy as possible, but I think it's just a chicken and egg theory.
So hopefully I won't lay an egg, but there was an earlier conversation today, and I was asked, what about the internet driver's license that you proposed 10 years ago? I actually seriously thought that just like we teach teenagers how to drive and how to be safe and what to anticipate when you're on the road, it occurred to me we might have classes that are essentially like an internet driver's license. Not that you have to show that bona fides that you took the class, but it would actually be quite a useful tool for people to learn about what hazards there are in the online environment, how to detect and defend yourself against them. And so maybe that should be part of the literacy program, which is teaching people how to do safe networking, and issue them a certificate saying that they've actually learned or at least been exposed to that.
So that's something I think we can always learn from. We have tried to do what is called a divide and conquer algorithm in terms of internet literacy. We gave a task to 2 million college students to train 10 other students each, and we incentivize them by a $1.50 payment per person that they would enroll. But it's really not a driving license like the way you are envisaging, but it's more like a small certificate. But I think we can go a step further, and I think those will be the new steps as we progress in this whole journey.
Well, your journey has certainly made enormous progress. We have a moment or two if there are other questions for Arvind.
Michael Sung had a question.
Sorry, I couldn't see that question. But,
he says, how does... Go ahead, Michael.
What you guys have done within this tech is absolutely remarkable. The financial inclusion potential. So, I'm very interested in the digital currency aspect of these things, digital assets. How does that actually fit into the stack? And is there a plan for that to be integrated? What's the roadmap for that?
Well, Michael, today itself we just had the first meeting on thinking about where do we want to go with digital assets, and whether because in India, again, as I told Wales, I'm glad you're using the right words in terms of assets and not transactions. So we've tried to separate this whole hysteria around crypto and blockchain and digital currencies from a transactional perspective vis-a-vis an asset perspective. From an asset perspective, I think we are about a year and a half away to really create a roadmap in terms of policy, regulation, and everything else, and then that's how we want to take it from there. But we are seriously thinking about a national digital asset, which will be backed or not backed by whatever the fiat currency would be. But at the end of the day, it will all be linked to the unified infrastructure. We are not building in isolation. Nothing is a silo. And remember, India has that identity layer that basically means I am uniquely now identifying every Indian with an identity, biometric identity. So everything is getting linked at the end of the day to that stack.
Thank you very much. That's very fascinating.
Dorothy has a question. Go ahead, Dorothy.
It's not really a question. I was just, well, it is a question. You said 120 million, or did you say 220 million people now, new people on the internet? And
200 million people in the last 18 months.
200 million in the last 18 months.
Correct.
And are they are they distributed evenly across the subcontinent, or do you see a concentration in north or south, or how do you see that?
That's interesting. Yeah, it's actually most of the new digital migrants or digital users are coming from non-urban areas. They've all come from rural areas. They've come from all across India, but not geographically separate, but from purely non-metros, non-big cities. They're all coming, reaching the villages and the rural population.
I think it will be fascinating to find out what different challenges come up as a result of the different cultures, because India is just so diverse and we can learn so much from it in the other countries of the South.
Very
so
true.
Thank you for an excellent presentation. Shukran. Or, yeah.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Thanks so much, Arvind. I think we'll move on now to a report from Chan Shileng from Singapore on GovTech and the COVID response. So, Chan Shileng, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good evening from Singapore, but good morning to most of you here. I'm here together with one of my colleagues from GovTech Open Government Products, Hong Yi. Oh, if you're here, you could say hi. Yeah, Hong Yi is Director of Open Government Products, and I'm his deputy. And we, together in the past 11 months, we've been working quite relentlessly on COVID-19 projects. So let me just bring you through a quick deck to give you a sense of how the Singapore government, through Open Government Products, has been deploying technology for our COVID-19 response. I'll share on three things. The first was on how technology accelerated the pace of the vaccination program here, how it enabled timely COVID-19 data flows, and empowered social responsibility. By way of introduction, our team is an experimental unit within GovTech. We are 55 software engineers, product designers, and product managers within the Singapore government. In December 2020, we received a call from the Ministry of Health with a mission, which was to come up with a quick way for people to access COVID-19 vaccinations based on whatever supply we had at the time. And we had to do it in about 2 weeks. That was about Eve of Christmas, and we had about 2 weeks to set up the system. And so our journey began. Our goal was to vaccinate about 80% of the population and deliver about 10 million doses across the span of about 9 months to achieve herd immunity for Singapore. And the target group, unlike many of our products, is everybody. So for this product, we had to plan and design for inclusion, from healthcare professionals to essential workers, all the way to seniors above the age of 65 and may not be digitally savvy, to adult students and everybody else. There were 4 main objectives of this project. The first was to get people vaccinated safely, minimize wasting of vaccines. We would give priority to those most at risk, and this included those who are working at the front lines, such as healthcare professionals and essential workers, as well as people who might be immunocompromised. And fourth was to ensure smooth traffic at clinics and to avoid crowd chokes, especially when demand ramped up and vaccine hesitancy was no longer an issue. The problem we had at hand was that we had an unknown demand in in the early phases of the vaccination program, we had to prioritize across different groups based on existing and uncertain supply, triage for medical eligibility before we direct people for appointments scheduling. So what the team did was to actually get engineers, designers, product managers, product operations specialists, and policymakers to come together to design for the user. We went upstream instead of waiting for policy guidance. We went upstream to work with policymakers to come up with an ops plan, and this allowed us to move as a unit to adapt quickly to changes. So this was the team that was on site at various primary care clinics and vaccination centers. The idea here was that we got basically a small team going of about 8 to 10 of us. Within a span of 2 weeks, understood what the users needed, what the ops plan looks like before ideating. So there was a lot of huddling around whiteboards. This whiteboard here, which I think Hong Yi, has Hong Yi scribbles and a number of teammates' inputs, was really it captured the end-to-end flow of the appointments booking system, all the way from pre-registration to vaccination day or to verification. Of note, I think a lot of these components didn't fall in place on day one, and it evolved quite a fair bit over time, and especially as the demand situation changed, our model and how the system was set up also had to evolve with time. The challenge was, of course, as in any product development process, understanding what were the most important and feasible features to have from all the useful features that users might have wanted, or features that would have helped with the operation. One of the first features we decided on was what we call a pre-registration workflow. In the absence of clarity around vaccination demand, we created a form that invited members of the public to first register their interest. This gave us essentially a database of people who were interested in getting vaccinated. When we had vaccine supplies coming in, we gradually opened up the slots to different groups of people based on a priority, from the oldest to the youngest, from most at risk to the least at risk. And this allowed us to prioritize access for groups with higher risk profile. So this is about summarizes actually the end-to-end flow. Individuals were invited to visit vaccine.gov.sg to register their interest. They were notified via mobile phone on when they will be eligible to make an appointment. They would then go through a medical triage and secure 2 dates within a set time window to access the appointments. And this is how the system looked like. Everyone received a unique booking code. They will enter this into the system, and the identification number of the government issued ID serves as the password, and they could then get started on making 2 appointments. There's some pre-screening medical information that they have to fill in. They're directed to book 2 appointments at the same time so that the second dose is always secured. This is fairly important in the early stages of the vaccination program, because we wanted to ensure that every individual in Singapore could access both doses and complete the full regimen of the COVID-19 vaccine. We also nudged users to clinics with less traffic by adding these tags here. So for clinics with more slots available, we made sure to bump them up so that individuals could see which ones had more slots, and we could direct traffic to clinics with more capacity. We also enabled location search so that people can find clinics that's nearest to them. And they could choose a time slot of their preference so they don't have to wait too long at the clinic. The first and second dose were also basically, the system auto-computes the time difference between the first and the second appointment to make sure that it falls under the recommended time window. And that's the final step. Individuals get a confirmation, and on the day of vaccination, get a reminder to show up at the clinic. There are a number of design decisions that the engineering team made to reduce risk as we move fast. As I mentioned earlier, the whole system, including the appointment system and various back-end systems, were built within 2 weeks. And to do that, we separated the team into various components, to handle various components from registration to booking to clinic front end to dashboarding. So different engineers are accountable for each system component. Overall, we reduce the propensity for conflict and speed up development time. We also avoided building custom-made tools by using simple quote-unquote kitchen tools, modular composable units that the team had already built prior to the vaccination program. This allowed us to scale rapidly. Some of these tools include a website builder, we call it Isomer, a form builder for registration, Postman, a mass notification tool, and Vault, an internal data sharing platform. We also tapped on other commercial tools like AWS, Twilio, Tableau, and Acuity. The idea was really to move fast, to use existing tools as much as possible, and to build for flexibility. In the early days, one of the very tempting things was to automate a lot of processes from the outset. But because of changing operational requirements, it wasn't really the best idea. So what the team did was to build the bare minimum of what would serve the operation end to end. And as requirements change, we change and reach a steady state, we started automating. The next part of this sharing, I thought I would go into how we designed for some of the systems on the back end to manage COVID data flows. Give you a sense, this is kind of initially what the COVID-19 system looks like in Singapore. It's got a lot of different systems, and it kind of looks like a spaghetti bowl. This is actually already a simplified diagram. The actual diagram has a lot more arrows in it. Now, systems that are relatively simple to manage when there are few components, and initially that was the case, but as COVID-19 progressed and different teams built different components, it added to the whole tech stack and increased the complexity of our overall systems pretty quickly. And so there was a need to actually simplify them into key components. In this case, in this diagram, as you can see, there was both a user interface, logic, and database for every single system across the entire COVID-19 ecosystem. This meant that keeping data synchronized across various systems was a huge challenge, and a lot of teams spent a fair amount of time doing data reconciliation. What the Open Government Products team did was to build a COVID-19 management backbone to resolve this complexity. And essentially what it does is two things. The COVID-19 management backbone is a central data repository that validates incoming data from upstream systems and only ingests data that fits our validation logic. It applies a consistent set of business logic that transforms the data into statuses that serves various downstream use cases, such as vaccination status for display when people enter premises, or informing testing regimes in Singapore. All told, COVID-19 management backbone serves as a central data exchange gateway that allows more than 50 government agencies to pull data and ensure that there is a consistent set of statuses that's being shared around government and across various private sector use cases. And on this note, I will share just one last demo on Sync. Sync is a new product that we recently launched as a means to enable citizens to share their COVID-19 records in a privacy-preserving way with their consent. Actually, not so different from the earlier sharing on how India does payment with consent of users. In this case, we're not doing payments, we're doing data sharing. We log in with the SingPass app. It is Singapore's version of the digital identity infrastructure. Using a mobile app, people will log in, tapping on the digital identity infrastructure. They will add recipients that they would like to share the data with. In this case, we started out with the ride-hailing industry. Some various taxi drivers had to submit the data to corporations who were enforcing various rules around testing. They provide consent to share their records by toggling on and off. What this front end allows individuals to do is to toggle on and off as they wish and enable operators, organizations, and employers to access their records on a subscription basis. The individual has full ownership and full control over when an organization sees their data and can retract that consent at any given time. Essentially, what we're working towards is to empower social responsibility through networked exchange of COVID-19 statuses, in particular test and vaccination status, by allowing individuals to grant consent to different organizations and workplaces that they're affiliated with, so that when there's a COVID-19 case detected or a cluster that has emerged within a workplace, employers and organizations can be the first responders in curbing the spread of COVID-19. So what they could do is then to isolate isolate various clusters of employees, and also to perform various public health measures like deep cleaning the office and ensuring that employees are performing tests at a higher frequency. So I've come to the end of my presentation. I'm very happy to take any questions. And Hong-Yi, if you've got anything to add to, welcome to. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's amazing what you were able to accomplish in that amount of time. That's just absolutely stunning. Now, just out of sheer curiosity, the proof of everything, of course, is did you manage to get 80% of everyone vaccinated in the time you desired? And how is it going now? I mean, what's the situation with COVID in Singapore?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Vincent. We've got about 90% of our population vaccinated. The last mile is really seniors who may not be very receptive to the COVID-19 vaccination for various reasons. But it has never been sort of bottlenecked by technology. It's more, trust towards the COVID-19 vaccine. So our last mile challenge is in convincing more seniors and elderly to get vaccinated in this case.
We have a similar problem here, and it's not just seniors. People of particular political persuasion are resisting vaccination, and of course it's harmful to the rest of the population. The other reason for asking the question, though, is that we've seen evidence here in the U.S. that even double and triple vaccinated people are still contracting COVID, and some are dying from it. A very famous person, Colin Powell, one of our most famous generals, passed away just a few weeks ago after having been double vaccinated and well prepared and taken care of. So it's a little scary. I just wonder whether you're seeing any resurgence because of Delta, for example.
We do get about 4,000 COVID-19 cases every day.
Wow.
Here in Singapore at this point. We're transitioning towards endemic, which is preparing the population. Now that we do have herd immunity to a large extent, the next step is to encourage people to take booster shots to extend the validity and efficacy of the vaccine. The second is back to what I mentioned about exercising personal and social responsibility, encouraging people to stay home when they're not feeling well, and to continually do tests before they go to work to make sure that they are not COVID positive. Yeah.
I have a couple of other questions, but I want to pause for a moment and see if anyone else wants to jump in.
Yeah, Maylin here. In the chat, I had mentioned that the modular building block approach could be actually very useful for the ITU DIAL initiative on digital building blocks. And so Singapore is already part of this initiative, but you guys in GovTech may not know. So Arvind Gupta from India, he's part of the GovStack initiative. The governments of Germany and Estonia are working with DIAL and the ITU to move this forward. Sherman Kong, did you want to say a few words? Sherman is the representative. Kate Wilson, with the CEO of DIAL, was on the call, but she had to leave. Sherman?
I hope you guys can hear me okay. I have some repair work happening, but
Yes, we
I
are.
really
It's good.
appreciate it on illustrating an application example of this modular approach in quick response to COVID-19 vaccination. It's fairly illustrative to have this kind of building block based approach or model in place so that you have rapid applicational response in the case of COVID and so on. Makes for the argument of what we're trying to do in synthesizing Singapore's experience, Indian experience on into GovSec initiative. So I know that we're connected with the Smart Nation and Digital Government Office in Singapore, but great to come up with some practical use cases where we can demonstrate the argument of this model. So really appreciate that you walk us through this example today. So thank you very much.
So it's Vint. I actually have questions for both of you. When I see how quickly you were able to move, of course, this is partly a function of the readiness of the population to accept and apply and use the technology. And the assumption, for example, that essentially everyone who needed to have a mobile phone has a mobile phone is an example of building a society around technology, which makes me nervous because when you become extremely dependent on a particular piece of technology like the mobile phone, and then it doesn't work for whatever reason. The power went out, the battery is dead, the communications isn't working because of destruction, because of a storm. You can imagine all kinds of scenarios. It feels very fragile. The other thing that your charts showed where you have more complexity in the system, whenever you add another thing that you're depending on, the reliability of the system tends to go down. So if you have something that's 90% reliable, and now you add another thing that's 90% reliable, and you're relying on both of them to work, the pair will only be reliable to 80% because it's the product of the reliability numbers. Do you feel in any way uncomfortable about launching this effort, knowing that it would only work if everyone's technical capacity to use the mobile was present?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about that. If that would be helpful. So the thing that we shared obviously is the it's the 90% use case solution, right? You have the mental model you have to have in mind is that you want to avoid trying to stretch a solution to handle too large a set of use cases if they're too sufficiently different. And what we found is this is actually something we run into a challenge pretty much for all of our applications that we develop. That there'll always be some objection that there are some group of citizens somewhere which cannot access data due to phones, etc. And as a result, we just don't move at all. And what we found actually is rather than trying to stretch the particular solution to handle everybody, we just do a two-part solution. Basically, we design for best what the normal tech-savvy person will do on this end of the spectrum. And then we create a sort of crude fallback that just basically roughly catches what everyone else does. So in Singapore, in particular, for this, we have what I call we have the community centers, and you can go down there to fill in forms and do all these various things. And what we created was we have this nice sort of flow interface that the average citizen uses. But for people who don't, they just go down to the community center, and we created an admin portal where they, show their ID and go the old school way of having the person there click the buttons for them and type their stuff in. And obviously we log all this so that the people administrating the system kind of use it, at least not too easily. So that's our approach that's been our approach, and we found that actually moves very well. Basically just accepting two-part solutions, which is primary and then fallback, handles that pretty well. You were talking about this idea about sort of the complexity, the sort of the compounding complexity of multiple sources of failure, etc. Right? So yes, so that's true, right? But you can also, which is why you have to engineer the system not to just chain them end to end, but sometimes have them in parallel. So if you remember Chilling's diagram, the diagram we showed of the whole system. I think the biggest mistake that people make when trying to digitize is that they try to digitize the whole thing all at once, which it's a complete failure, right? It's sort of trying to build a factory, but thinking the factory has to be completely fully automated end to end. In fact, when factories first start, you don't automate everything end to end. You have a bunch of tools, and then human beings like carry the stuff in between those tools. So that if any particular tool fails, there's always a sort of like intervention and recovery point between them. And it's only once those things are working really well that you try to streamline. And so if you look at the diagram of what we showed, I would say about 80% of what's on that diagram is human processes. It's like the Ministry of Finance needs to do this and do that. And so you're not trying to build a computer system. You're trying to build a system operating this with certain components being computers. And that way, when those components fail, it's very easy to understand what the inputs and outputs for those components are. And those temporary failures, you can easily route around them and do a manual recovery if necessary. Yeah, so as a very concrete example, instead of like we could have built this, for getting the name lists of the people who need to get their vaccine appointments first, right? This could have been an automated thing where people apply and they go to a portal and they click it and it generates all this. But instead, we just like went bare bones and said, you send us a CSV, an email every day with like the people you want to send out to every day, and we will send it to those people. I don't care what you do on your end. You can use Excel, you can use committee discussions, and that way you have this intervention point where like, if all else fails and like whatever you need to slide some person in because they need to travel urgently or something like that, all you need to do is just insert the name on the CSV and then it goes out.
This is the same theory that led to the simplicity of the internet protocol. Same idea. Do the minimum that you can get away with, and then build everything else on top of that. Arvind confirms that he followed a similar tactic with regard to the 80-20 rule in terms of what you assume the population can manage, and then you deal with the rest of them by an alternative tactic. So that all makes good sense to me too. All right, I think we probably, well, let's find out. Are there any other questions at this point? Okay, then apparently I'm next, at least according to my chart here. And I don't need the 15 minutes that you allocated to me. The topic is accessibility. And I just wanted to start out by pointing out that it's hard. Accessibility is not a trivial thing to accomplish. And the reason for that is that the needs are so diverse. If you look at people with various and sundry disabilities, whether it's vision impairment or hearing impairment or motor impairment or even a cognitive impairment, the various... Lynn Wells has got his hand up. Lynn, did you want to interrupt?
No, I hit the button wrong. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. So the problem here is enormous diversity and spectrum. I don't mean autism here, but just the spectrum of variability for accommodating various accessibility needs is very broad. And the people who write the software that are trying to do that often don't have intuition about what works and what doesn't work for all these various cases. You really can't expect someone who isn't blind, for example, to know the way in which a JAWS screen reader works and how to compose a web page which would be particularly well suited to presentation through a screen reader, for example. If we think about it for a moment, you're designing a two-dimensional web page application. People who can see will see various choices on the screen in this two-dimensional way, and maybe draw attention to things by flashing lights or changing colors or doing other things. Now you have to present this thing to someone who is blind, and they can only discover it by serial audible means. And figuring out how to design a web page that can be interacted with successfully that way, using, for example, a screen reader, is a non-trivial exercise. And so you have to start thinking at the beginning of the design of an application how it is going to appear to people who are in need of various kinds of accommodation, whether it's blowing up the size of the text so that they can read it, or changing the contrast so that it's readable, or adding captions in the case that there's a voiceover instruction. You have to think about all those things ahead of time, and that's hard. Second problem is that we don't necessarily have uniform tools for dealing with these things, although screen readers are an example of an attempt to create a uniform tool. Then you need to get the web page designers to know more about how screen readers work so that they can design web pages that are compatible with that particular technology. Now at Google, we spent a fair amount of time trying to make use of machine learning in aid of accessibility. And so some of the efforts have been pretty successful. You'll see the result when you see the recordings, because I'm recording my entire screen right now, and you will see at the bottom of the screen automatic captions that are coming up in the Google Meet. And at least I hope so, but I'm recording the entire screen using the Mac facility. The Google facility for recording doesn't actually pick up the captions, so which is interesting. In any case, we use machine learning for that purpose, and we can do 100 different languages, depending on which language is being spoken. Now, we don't do real-time translation yet. I wish we did, but that's not quite there. So captions are one thing. A second thing that we've been able to do is we take people whose speech is hard to understand. Perhaps you have cerebral palsy and your speech is impaired, or if you were born deaf, sometimes your speech, if you speak, is difficult to understand. We have a program we call Euphonia, which means good sound in Greek, which can transform the speech which we have understood using the machine learning into something which is more understandable by a person who needs to hear more normal speech. So there are a variety of things along those lines. Then there's been a lot of work on image understanding and image processing in order to help people with augmented reality. So as an example, if you hold your mobile up on a menu that's written in a language that you don't read, if we're capable of doing the character recognition, then we can do translation of the menu into a language you can read. So there's been a lot of work to try to apply machine learning to improve accessibility. I don't think that we can say it's all 100%, but it's striking to see how far machine learning has gotten us in using these modalities, which historically have not been very successful with computer-based systems. The third thing I wanted to draw your attention to is that there is a statistic which is often used in speaking about accessibility, and that's that 1 billion people in the world, roughly, have a disability of one kind or another. And so all of the pitches about utility of accessibility and accommodation are couched in this, it helps 1 billion people. That's actually bad math, because the real fact is it helps everybody, or at least it helps everybody that person interacts with. And so you could argue that all 7 billion people on the planet are aided by accommodation for someone with a disability. So that's the first point. Second point on this same topic is that almost everyone at one point or another in their lives will experience a temporary disability. Like you break your leg and you're in a wheelchair for 6 weeks, or you break your hand and have only one hand to work with for a while and you can't button your shirt. I've actually gone to people who have experienced some of these disabling events and have asked them to record the things that they couldn't do during this period of disability. And the reason I wanted them to do that was to illustrate for people who are able-bodied what it's like when, even if you temporarily lose a capability, how extensive that can be, and how much it is appreciated that there are accommodations for people that have those kinds of disabilities. And then you can imagine what it must be like if you're chronically disabled in one way or another, whether it's having to use a wheelchair or having to use screen readers or other kinds of accommodation. Last point, I think, is that we often don't realize how creative people with disabilities are, because they have to be creative every single day to cope with whatever their disabilities are. And so if you're looking for inventive and creative people, some of the most creative people in the world are the ones who have disabilities who are living with them and coping with them because they're really good at inventing solutions to problems that others might not think of. So those are just a few examples of why accessibility is such an important topic to consider, because it's beneficial for a much larger portion of the population than is typically accounted for. So Mei-Lin, I think I can go back now to your newcomers and introductions, but very nearly on time.
Actually, no, I want to say a few words.
I see, okay.
The thing is about accessibility, and for the people-centered internet, digital inclusion is one of our highest priorities. I want to point out to people that Vint himself and his wife have hearing impairment. And I heard about this when he gave a talk at South by Southwest in 2017. And I want everybody to realize how much the internet has actually been informed by the fact that Vint is aware of this issue. And it really calls attention to the call that not about us without us. And this is happening in the internet everywhere, because we don't have blind people making decisions about how user interface is done. We don't have deaf people working on apps. These are huge problems around, and I wondered if Vint, you could actually just say, actually for the historical record, how much you think you've actually affected things by being aware of this issue.
Well, first of all, I have to give you counterexamples to your point about deaf people aren't doing anything. Setting aside my little bit, some of the best applications for us, captioning on YouTube was done by a deaf guy. We have another application called Live Transcribe that takes up to 100 different languages, and it is audio input and transcribes them on the mobile in the language. So if you're speaking, you have to tell it ahead of time whether it's Chinese or Russian or Spanish or English. But the fact is that a deaf Russian guy at Google developed that application. So we have people at Google who are developing applications, who have disabilities, who are developing applications for people with disabilities. That's good news. We need more of that because they intuitively understand what is needed in order to make something work well. But of course, any one disability, I'm hearing impaired and wear hearing aids, my wife has 2 cochlear implants, but we're not experts at everything. We're just experts at ourselves. And our ability to work has been facilitated in large measure by technology. In my case, email has turned out to be a very important thread in my entire career, because email gets invented in 1971 in the ARPANET project. And every job I've had since that time has always had access and use of email, which has been very beneficial as opposed to trying to listen to telephone conference calls. So for me anyway, my career has very much been colored by attention to and sensitivity to the need for accommodation for people with accessibility problems. So thank you for letting me add that to the discussion. But I do think we should get introductions done for any newcomers that are still left.
Yes, I think we've got Govinda Ahluwalia. Govinda, would you like to introduce yourself? Maybe not.
Maybe not.
I'm seeing that Qiling has somewhat introduced herself, but Hong Yi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Hong. I've been in government now about 8+ years. Before that, I worked at Google for a couple of years on the distributed databases and image search teams. Basically, what I'm trying to do right now in the government is I'm trying to take what I learned about how to run modern tech teams at Google and try to bring that to the public sector. My underlying goal, basically, is that we need the best people working on the most important problems. And I think that's a shame because, in general, people acknowledge that government is handles probably good government is probably one of the most important things in the world. And almost everywhere you go, people don't want to work in the government because it's hard and it sucks. And so I'm trying to turn the government into a really good place to work so we have the best people working on the most important problems.
Thank you. We should have Arvind after this. Arvind.
Govinder also has a hand up, by the way.
But
thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead,
I'm
Govinder.
sorry to resequence the order over here. I couldn't get to the screen fast enough. Thanks for noticing, Vint. So glad to get introduced to the forum and what fascinating work over here. My background has, of course, been deep and wide in technology, riding on the coattail of obviously a lot of the work that Vint did. Vint, you'll be proud to know I installed the second largest commercial TCP/IP network of the world, which was way back then with Motorola. And you and I have had a chance to talk about blockchain previously. May not be your favorite topic, but has a lot of attention. I was previously the CTO of IBM's blockchain, cloud, and IoT business. Max Angus had connected us. So thank you, Malin, for all the bold and human causes that I'm hearing about, and thanks for my participation.
Thank you. Arvind?
Yeah, hi, thank you. It's very interesting to follow up with what Hong Lee just said, because I come from a very, very private sector startup culture in Silicon Valley to academic research at Illinois Urbana-Champaign to last 7 years in the government. And the transition is very, very interesting. I take it. So I'm based in Delhi. I work with the government on building digital public goods, and that's been our thesis that digital public goods basically creates a lot of value for the ecosystem, for society, and for businesses and startups. And that's what we've been building stack after stack. I'm a technologist who's done many startups in many different spaces, and I love to teach and just looking at how we can train the future digital policy and technologists to really help the government scale up. The challenges are similar to Hong Lee is saying that we have. Nobody wants to join the government but criticizes all the time. So having worked in various spaces and coming to the government, I'm in the culture of building startups inside the government. I always joke that doing a startup in Silicon Valley is easy, doing a startup in Bangalore is easy, doing a startup inside the government is the most difficult task. But that's what.
All true. Although there's some parts of government that really work great. My 6 years at the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency were absolutely fabulous because the organization itself was absolutely focused on innovation and challenge and trying to do things that nobody else had ever done before, and that is very satisfying. But it doesn't work that way in all parts of the government. So points well taken.
Well, I think then next should be John Horton, who is one of our latest senior PCI fellow. John, would you like to introduce yourself? You're muted. Still muted. It looks muted. I don't know if we can unmute you.
Let's see, that's weird. I'm not sure that you can.
Okay,
he says communication problems. I wonder if his microphone is disconnected, like the situation we had earlier.
Well, while we debug that, I'd like Sylvia Paul Ahrens, who presented at the beginning. She is our Olympic winner. So, Sylvia, please tell about your wonderful background as well as joining the ITU.
Thank you very much. Well, I always joke that in a past life, literally in the last century, I was a swimmer and had the blessing, because it is a blessing, to go all the way to Olympics twice. So I did it twice. But that gave me the life lessons to get me where I am today, and that's why I'm also very proud of my work of ITU and what I'm doing at the UN on digital inclusion. I come from Costa Rica, which is, and I represented Costa Rica as a swimmer. And it's a small developing country, and I lived most of my life in developing countries. So I know what it is to not have connectivity and issues on inclusion and persons with disabilities who don't have access. And I mean, I've lived it. I've been there, and only very recently, a few years ago, I moved to Geneva. So I'm always looking to see, with my experience of having lived in developing countries, coming from a small country like Costa Rica, which in the COP26 I think was also very active, because we're trying to be leaders on issues related to climate change and renewable energies. So yes, very happy, Baining, to see you again. It's always a pleasure. I hope to see you face to face in ITU at some point. And thank you for everybody and your interest on our work on Generation Connect and all the things out that we're doing on visual inclusion. Because I'm so happy to hear so many things here that it's a bit difficult to take so many notes, but it's been super interesting. So I'm happy that Doreen asked us to join because she was not able to. So it's been a great lesson for me just sitting here and listening to all of you. So thank you, Mandy.
Great. John Horton.
Well, thank you, Maylene, and everyone. What wonderful presentations. I'm John Morton. I was teed up very well, that discussion on the government, because I came from 30 years of the government. So it was a very interesting discussion there. I was fortunate to be able to run the Army's Research Development Engineering Command, which are the 15,000 scientists and engineers in all disciplines, where it's very integral to what we're talking about is that I had all the networks and all the things that were in what was the command and control and integration. But that's where this discussion is so very, very wonderful and interesting to me, and hearing all the different comments, seeing it from the other side, from the military, and how we would interface and rely on industry to help us with that innovation. But as this discussion has happened, and there's so much that needs to be done on a people-centered internet and principles and standards. So I'm very, very excited to be able to help shape some of that. So thank you for letting me be here. Again, 30 years plus in the military in the science and technology. Thank you.
Great. Is there anybody else? Is Danola still here? No, I think
Yes. Yes.
Oh, good. Good. Please, Danola, go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure if you can see me, but I work with Sylvia on Generation Connect. And so, yeah, we're working together in the ITU, in the digital inclusion team. And please reach out to us if you have any questions about the work we're doing with young people. It's so important that young people are seen as leaders in the digital development space. And we were so glad to get some emails and some interest in the chat. So we've already started emailing some of you. If you would like some more details, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Danola. Gora Data has a hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of comments if we have time.
Sure, go ahead.
Based on what I heard today. First of all, yeah, as always, exciting, very fascinating conversation. One comment when you were talking about and Maylene about the disability and the innovation related to that emerging, to solve. I don't know whether it's a right to equate, but some we may want to look into the challenges and problem when you are in especially in a language centric situation. You may not, but in a country where you don't speak the language or you're there for the first time, you have similar reaction or challenges that you're unable to follow anything or don't know how to do it. Similar to, let's say, if you're blind or can't see well in eye, and then now you're interfacing. So maybe that's one way to also to bring in, and not just always think that you have to be disabled to therefore solve the problem.
Yes. So by analogy, if you've experienced something it could be a metaphor for the problems that you face. However, one thing I will say is that it's one thing to generate empathy, but it might be something else to figure out what the right solution is for a particular situation and particular kind of disability. But nonetheless, generating empathy does produce a certain amount of insight, and that's helpful.
So I thought I'll just make that comment. The other one, to go back to one of the comments Dorothy had made way back, and I want to extend that a little more in terms of skills and then the skills gap and the associated discussion with workforce development, which normally didn't really come up on this particular forum, but there is a correlation. But also recognizing that, and this is not new, but recognizing that most of the emerging tech we are dealing with today have come around in the last, let's say, 20 years or so. If you took at most of the top emerging techs, whereas on the educational side, most of our faculties were, been in the academia for the last 30 years or so. So we do have the challenge of the skills gap and the trainer, and these are some of the things we also need to consider as we look into the future.
Absolutely true. We are just about out of time, Mei-Lin, and I don't have any deep closing remarks to make, except to say thank you to everyone for presentations and discussion. These need to continue because we are experiencing vicariously what a lot of people are exploring in an intellectual landscape that we need to learn to cope with as the 21st century unfolds. So, Mei-Lin, thank you for continuing to organize these meetings and to draw us together. Hopefully our shared experiences will lead to good solutions.
Yes, thank you, Vin, for your leadership. Thank you all for coming. You're all welcome back, and we'll reach out to you to put you on the invitation list.
And I will end the recordings and send you, assuming it worked, I'll send you a copy of it, Mei-Lin.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody. See you on the
Bye-bye.
net.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.